Hello everyone and welcome to your first video for 2D animation and interactivity. My name's Dave Luke. I am obviously an instructor at Normandale, and you'll get to know my voice over the semester via these screen capture videos. This first one here is basically called Animate Basics. And the idea behind this video is to just give you a tour of what Animate looks like. We're not going to sort of end up with anything with this video, but as stated in the week 2 file, this video is pretty important to sort of finding our way around Animate and sort of understanding the difference between it and other graphics programs. Obviously, this is an animation class, and you probably have a pretty basic understanding that this is different from something like Photoshop or Illustrator or any other animation program. But again, this is going to allow us to sort of see how this program works and introduce sort of the areas, functionalities, and how this program and application works. What I'm going to be doing here is showing you around, and then I'm going to open actually a video or an FLA file and sort of discuss the structure of it. It's actually the sample video that you should be able to view that's uploaded on the week 2 module. So first and foremost, I want to sort of discuss, and I'm going to discuss this via looking at Animate, the difference between this and other graphics programs. It's important because we need to understand this idea of a vector graphic. And without further ado, what I'm going to do is sort of create a file and sort of show you the difference between a vector graphic and what is considered a raster-based graphic. I'm going to head into this, and again, we're just sort of watching this video, and you're sort of sitting back and hopefully understanding for the first time how this program works. I would highly suggest you have Animate open with potentially this video off to the side. Obviously, you can pause it, sort of poke around, see what I'm doing, but it's going to be a good way to get a hands-on version of what I'm doing here. Now, when you open Animate, you're going to get this sort of window here that basically sort of asks you to create a new file. There are lots of different options. For the most part, we're going to be doing ActionScript 3.0 files. The idea behind this is a file that allows for interactivity. ActionScript is the language that Animate uses in order to create interactivity. We're going to be doing this mid-semester, so get used to creating an ActionScript 3.0 file. I've had students that accidentally create some of these other files, HTML5 canvas file or WebGL file. Make sure you when noted, create an ActionScript 3.0 file, which for the most part is going to be all the time. So I'm going to click on this, and I enter into Animate. Let's do a tour before we sort of do anything. And then I'm going to explain what I just sort of mentioned, that raster and raster and vector difference. In Animate, we have sort of lots of different sort of spaces and areas in which we can work with. One quick thing to note up at the top, and this is over here on the top right, is the sort of workspaces. I'm going to click on this, and you're going to see, Animator, Classes, Classic, Debug, Designer, Developer, etc. I'm, for the most part, in my instructions going to be using Classic. All this means is that things are sort of arranged in different ways. You can do all the same things, but you'll see if I go into Animator, we have all these different options. For a beginning class in animation and Animate, Classic is a simpler sort of interface, so I'm going to be working in Classic. This is a preference of mine while teaching. If you guys sort of sink your teeth into this program in the long run, you might sort of choose other workspaces. So I'm in Classic. I say that because we need to sort of understand all these different spaces. First and foremost, let's talk about this area right here. This is considered the stage. This is where stuff happens. This is where we sort of place things in order to animate them. And you'll see that this is a defined area. I mentioned this defined area because later when we go into the library, we're going to see that this is not a defined area, and I'll talk about the difference. So this is the stage. Please note that that's the sort of main area. I'm going to zoom in and out, and I'm doing this on my keyboard and I'm on a Mac. I'm doing Command, let me click on here, Command plus and Command minus. You can also zoom in and out of the stage over here on the right with the percentages if you're sort of working on something and you want to see it in more detail. Okay, so I'm going to go back to 100%. Over here we have our tools. One tool, and the main tool to sort of note at this point, is going to be our selection tool. This is the black arrow. This allows us to sort of grab objects and move it around. You'll see me a lot in the videos just kind of default to going over there in order to grab an object over here and move it around. So get to know this black selection tool. There is a sub-selection tool, which is white, but for the most part, we're going to be using this selection tool here. So we have our stage, we have our tools. Up here we have our timeline. Our timeline over the semester is going to get much more complicated than we see here. You're going to note all these little tiny frames. These represent moments in time, and as we sort of work on the exercises that you'll be working on this week, you'll see that we're doing stuff over 60 frames or 100 frames. One thing Animate has added recently, which I think is great, is this 1 second, 2 second, 3 second sort of marks. Animate defaults to 24 frames per second, so anything that happens between frame 1 and frame 24 consists of 1 second. I stress this now because a common mistake in beginning animation and using Animate is sort of not paying attention to time, meaning that students will cram, a ton of stuff in 3 seconds. And common critique is, hey, that went way too fast. Okay, so stage, tools, timeline. Last two we're going to work on are over here, and this one's called the library. And this is a blank document, so we don't have anything in the library. I'm going to show you a file that has a bunch of stuff in it here in a minute, and you'll see sort of the difference between the things that are sort of in the library. The other sort of tab is properties. I'm not going to go over each of these because I'm going to be going over them as they relate to specific exercises. But this is where we kind of change stuff, change colors, change size of the file. I will sort of be very specific about changes over in the Properties tab per the exercise. Please note that the Library and Properties tab are sort of a toggle back and forth. You're often changing something in the library via the properties, so it's interesting that, or it's good that they are next to each other. Okay, now that's the general sort of area, or that's the general sort of workspace of Animate. One difference you might see when you open up and are in Classic is your tools might be sort of aligned off to the left here. I use a screen capture piece of software to do these videos, and I find sort of separating out the tools in order to show you what I'm doing is a little bit easier. So if your tools look a little bit different, even in this Classic mode, don't worry about that. Now, I mentioned that one, I want to sort of show you the difference between sort of a raster-based graphic and a vector-based graphic, and two, I was going to show you a file that sort of is has something going on. So I'm going to pause the video for a second here and open those two things. Okay, I'm back, and I have two things I want to show you, and they are two very different files. First and foremost, I have what's called .fla file open here. This is a short little fun animation. This is actually the sample video that you need to be able to watch in Flash Player or Flash Debugger or a browser. Please see the week 2 file in order to sort of open this and take a look at it and read the importance of it. But this is a sample animation actually made by my 9-year-old son. He has a fun character called Dr. Whoops, a well-meaning doctor that always gets into funky situations. I'm using this file to sort of show you the difference between a raster-based graphic and a vector-based graphic. Vectors, and I'm going to zoom in, are basically bits of graphics that are created by computers and an algorithm that basically states via math that this is a black line, and it goes from here, and it goes from here, and it's this thick, and it is positioned in this spot. It is not, and I'll use the sort of contrast, a raster-based graphic, which is a pixel. If we think about, and I'm going to pop up an image here, and this is just an image of a cornfield. If we think about a photographic image, and if I zoom in, and I'm going to zoom, 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 keep going, we start to see little squares that make up photographic information. That is not the case in a vector-based graphic. A vector-based graphic can be enlarged, it can be sized without losing quality. We cannot do that, and now I'm zooming out, generally speaking, with a photograph. A photograph has a limitation in terms of how much information those pixels have, and therefore can only sort of be blown up to a certain extent. It can't be modified as much as a vector-based graphic. Now, the downside, or the sort of, let me zoom out here. The downside or difference is we generally have flatter graphics here in vector-based graphics. They tend to be more sort of solid colors and not as descriptive as a photograph. Later in the semester, we're going to import some photographs and we're going to convert them to vector-based graphics so we can use things that are photographic. But for now, we're going to be using more sort of simply drawn elements. Again, this is a pretty simple animation here. Quick little rehash of the tour, and the reason being is we have stuff in these spaces now. Our stage has sort of some action going on here, and if I pull the playhead across, I can sort of see Dr. Whoops coming to the balloon cellar, getting a balloon, etc. Over here in our timeline, I have different layers, and we're going to get into making different layers where different things are happening. And most importantly, over in our library now, we have different what's called symbols. Some of your first things you're going to do in your exercises are going to be to sort of insert new symbol and sort of create and generate these graphics over here. One differentiation I want to make, and this is very important because in Animate you have to sort of always pay attention to where you are. If I am inside the library, and I'm going to go to, let's go to something really, really simple. So let's go to Balloon Cellar. You'll see that when I double click on Balloon Cellar, I enter this whole other area. And this other area is the library. Consider this sort of like your sketch pad where you're making the stuff. And you need to sort of make sure you differentiate. Inside the library, you'll see this vast white space. That vast white space differs from the stage, okay? The stage is a sort of confined space, and inside the library you have this vast white space that sort of looks like you're on the stage and looks like you're in Animate because, or you're in your main movie because you have a timeline up here, etc. But make sure you understand the difference between being on the stage and being in your library. That will become clear as I sort of go over the step-by-steps in relation to your exercises. So, last thing I'm going to say is has to do with the file type. When you create a ActionScript 3.0 file, and it's probably hard to see here, but you'll see it when you create your first exercise, it says, and this is drwhoopsballoon.fla. That .fla is a leftover from when Animate was called Flash, but these are our master files. Okay, these are the files that sort of create all the information where you change things, etc. In the step-by-steps that you're going to go over this week, you're going to have a step called Control Test Movie in Animate, and you're going to get, that's very loud, you're going to get a file that's called .swif. Okay, and this is the exported sort of file that we view. Always hand in your SWIFs unless I ask you for your .fla, and that's generally because there's a problem, or I need to help you with something, or we need to fix something. That'll be something you email to me. So understand the difference between the .fla, which is our master file, and the SWIF, which is sort of the exported file we view. Okay, so that is a sort of quick but important introduction to Animate. Again, you're not sort of creating a file for this, but mainly just sort of getting a tour. At this point, you should be heading into the motion tween part one, the part one video, as well as the step-by-step file that accompanies it. Any questions about this, please email me to clarify. Otherwise, at this point, you should be heading into your first exercise.